probably good for children. I'm going to look into what we actually know about the health promoting benefits, or the benefits of nature for children and adolescents. I should probably say that, my name is Lærke. I'm a research assistant from Student Diabetes Center Copenhagen. I'm in a department where we work with health promotion research and prevention research. And it's also coming from this sort of paradigm that we're looking at this research. So I'm gonna get into that a little bit more, just the kind of lens that we're looking at the literature from or with. But just to say, just to give you a bit of background, I'll be presenting some results from a systematic review that's actually nested within a larger review that we did, and it's been published in Danish. We're working on getting it published in English as well. The aim of the larger review was to describe and discuss documented knowledge about the health promoting effects of friluftsliv, or outdoor life, as you would also translate it to, in 3 different domains. The traditional one, which you could say is recreational, and a more recent one where it's part of pedagogical practice in education, daycare institutions, and then in social and health sectors. The background for doing this more focused review is that we see that today non-communicable diseases and mental disorders are really the primary source of youth with disability, and this is for high-income countries, but it's also for low and middle-income countries. Actually, it used to be other types of communicable diseases like tropical diseases, but these are actually the top issues today. And also, nature's been important and affordable and upstream health promotion interventions, and that means a very early prevention strategy to prevent these diseases from happening. But the majority of existing research is relational, so it's not really suited for saying anything about effects, and it's also based mainly on adults, so it might not be directly transferable to children. You see from existing narrative reviews that there might be, or there are health benefits for children, but the state of the evidence is unclear. So that's why we wanted to make this more focused review, trying to describe and discuss the documented knowledge about health promotion benefits of friluftsliv, or nature-based programs that are targeted at children and adolescents. And what I will be talking about is mainly which types of interventions and outcome measures have been receiving the most and less attention, or least attention, and what is the quality of the evidence. And on this last research question, it's really important to say that talking about quality of evidence, we're looking at the evidence of the research within a health or medical paradigm. So that means talking about evidence with a pretty strict and maybe a little bit rigid set of rules for what is good evidence. And in some ways it might not be very suited for something like outdoor education or friluftsliv. In another ways it's just that it might not be very suited, because friluftsliv is not like a pill. It's very, very different from taking a pill and trying to use the same methods that you use in a traditional medical paradigm. Just bear this in mind, and I'm really happy to discuss what kind of conflicts that creates. I also think that it has potential to really start to take friluftsliv and make it very relevant in public health. If you start using these methods and trying to apply it and adapt it to something like friluftsliv. But I think it's very exciting to talk about, and I'm critical about it myself. But let's try to see what what the results are when you start using that kind of method with this type of research. Just briefly, what we did is that we looked at Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, German, and English literature that was published after 2003. We included peer-reviewed publications, but also dissertations, reports, book chapters. We looked only at quantitative research, and then we looked at Friluftsliv, which were nature-based programs, which we in this context defined as direct exposures to nature or uses of nature, including park, forest, beach, countryside, but not gardens, and not virtual nature. And we could also discuss this, but this is the conceptualization that we made in terms of what Friluftsliv was in this study. And we looked at health quite broadly. We only included target or populations that were between 0 and 18 years old. We found 84 studies, or I should say 84 publications and 90 studies, because some of the publications had several studies in them. And then we used the GRADE framework, which is again used for assessing the quality of the evidence at an outcome level for various interventions, and then used to inform medical and health fields and provide recommendations for action. The way the GRADE works is that it takes randomized within and between studies and sort of say that they are at the off or at the starting point high quality evidence, and everything else is considered low evidence. And then from this sort of starting point, you can downgrade or upgrade the evidence at an outcome level. So first you assess the individual studies, and then try to take all these different studies and look at the overall quality of the evidence for this outcome. Does that make sense? What we found was that most of these studies had been conducted with adolescent populations, just about 80%. And it had been looking at or investigating a lot of different, or including a lot of different target groups. Children and adolescents with behavioral and emotional disturbances, adolescents mainly with substance abuse, juvenile delinquents, socially disadvantaged populations, overweight children, but also typically developing children. Most of the studies looked at adventure therapy, adventure education type of interventions or programs used as part of educational activities or as psychological or behavioral treatments, ranging from 1 to 70 days. Some studies, but not such a large representation, looked at education outside the classroom, and very few studies looked at outdoor kindergartens and preschools. Yeah, most of the studies came from USA, and it's also a bit of a representation from Australia and New Zealand, and a bit of the literature to do with education outside the classroom came from the Nordic countries. So, yep. We saw that 60% of the studies utilized designs that were appropriate for correlational evidence, so that is pre-post designs without any control, for example, or other types of cross-sectional studies. And 41% of the studies utilize some form of control, so that would be controlled randomized trials or other types of pre-post designs where they use a control group. And most of these studies were rated low quality according to this GRADE assessment scheme, and for 24 moderate. So this is a word cloud of the types of outcomes that have been explored in these various studies. The letters that are written in larger size The words that are on larger slides are the words that were explored most frequently. So you can see that the psychosocial outcomes such as self-efficacy, self-esteem, self-concept were very common. And you probably also know this intuitively from research to do with adventure therapy and adventure education. But this graph doesn't really tell us anything about whether or not it benefited the children. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about that. And this is the mental health outcomes. You can see that 70 or almost 70 studies included mental health outcomes, and 31 of these utilized some kind of control group or control group exposure design. And this is only the control studies that have been included in this graph. What you can see is that the psychosocial category of outcomes overall seems to be beneficial. What these colorings mean is that the darkest blue is that there was a development for the intervention group that wasn't seen for the control group, but in some of the cases, like with the lighter blue there, you could see there was a development for the intervention group and the control group. And I'll get back to talking a little bit more about why that could be. But it's interesting enough to see that, for example, for self-esteem, which is the top one, that out of 11 studies, 8 indicated that there was a definite benefit for the intervention and not one for the control group, which is pretty sort of indicative in terms of the benefits. Then we have the sort of more cognitive types of outcomes, where you can also see that cognitive performance, for example, there's 3 studies where there was benefits in the intervention group and not one in the control group. And this relates more to studies that were exploring or investigating the effects of short exposures, like just walking in a natural environment versus walking in an urban environment. So these like environmental psychology kind of studies. And this was overall rated as low quality evidence. And I'll get back to talking about why it was rated low. So the social health outcomes, things like social support, relationship to peers, peer rejection, and these relational outcomes. You can also see that there's some studies where they found a benefit that wasn't found in the control group, but also quite a few where there was a benefit, but also one in the control group. And then it becomes a little bit more difficult to interpret. Is there a clear sort of benefit there? It's a little bit harder to say. And the same actually goes for the other ones. The other categories, you could say, they are more skills oriented, and some are more behaviorally oriented. Then we come to the physical health outcomes, and we only found 7 studies that had utilized some form of control group or control exposure. And I'm gonna show you another graph, also including some of the correlational studies, to just give you a better idea of what's actually been done. But what's interesting here is that, for example, body mass is it's an interesting graph, and it's a good example of some of the issues that can be in these sort of controlled studies if you're not using an appropriate control group. But yeah, I'll explain more. You can see there's 3 studies, and they observed that there was significant reductions in BMI. It was in the overweight population that they included, and they participated in all 3 studies. In all 3 studies, they participated in adventure therapy, and then they compared these groups with another control group that had participated in a physical activity program instead. So there was no treatment group, and there was no treatment as usual kind of group. And this is the language that's used in a medical paradigm. So basically, you end up with a rather weak sort of foundation for this comparison. Yeah, so that's a bit of an issue because it would indicate that there's something happening, but we get a sort of like a mixed impression of what's actually going on. We've included some of the correlation studies. You see that there's a heap of studies that have been exploring physical activity. And it makes quite a sense that physical activity hasn't been used as a pre-post type of measure because it's a dynamic dynamic measure that you'll measure during the activity and not before and after. But here you can see the 10 studies, and 8 of these would indicate that there's more physical activity going on. And in this case, it's most often education outside the classroom in nature, where we can see that kids who are taking part in, children who are taking part in education outside the classroom are more physically active than children who are in typical schooling. So what should we in particular take notice of? I think what should be sort of taken notice of is that interventions either benefited children or had neutral similar effects to other programs, and the majority across these outcomes was that the interventions benefited children. No studies indicated there were negative outcomes. However, there's a lot of writing there. Apologies. There are some issues in terms of accumulating really strong evidence in this field, and this is very much to do with having the research being spread over a lot of different outcomes, a lot of different types of interventions. So that is types of exposures, durations, target groups, and control conditions. The quality of research was, generally speaking, quite low. And again, this is talking from a medical point of view, or a public health point of view. The frequent reasons for downgrading quality of studies was that the studies used generally very small sample sizes. They included unsuited control groups, but also very often relied on interventions or intervention groups that had self-selected into the groups that had a special interest in participating, and the control group didn't. So you would have groups that would have different change potentials. You would have groups that were probably quite different in a lot of ways, and these background statistics weren't presented in very much detail. The same thing goes in terms of descriptions of recruitment and inclusion criteria. These are really, really important details for understanding what you can sort of infer from the research. And then also in terms of intervention, what you can say is intervention black boxing, which has an influence on to what degree you can transfer the experiences, the findings you get in your individual research and individual studies. The question is, what's actually happening during these different interventions that are probably amazing, but it's hard to say when you're reading the papers. And if you don't know this, how can you replicate it in a different setting? And then I've just written that the idea checklist is amazing for describing these interventions that are very, very complex. And I'd also say that it's remarkable that studies that are looking at something that is so complex so seldom use monitoring of what's actually going on, so seldom use process evaluation. So these are things that could definitely improve the quality of evidence. And then this is something that I didn't actually explain, but there is a tendency, particularly with interventions that are non-recurring, that the effects fade over time. There might be an amazing effect directly after a 5-week program, wilderness expedition, something like that, but when they measure again after 6 months, there's little or very often no effect at all, and that causes me to think that it might be very, very helpful to start considering longevity and sustainability as well as immediate effects when planning the actual interventions and trying to think in terms of integrating these things in everyday life and everyday settings for children. And then I thought it was also remarkable there was a little research looking at the youngest children. I think it was less than 10%. And this group is just really, really central, also from a health promotion perspective. Over the life course, the risk of developing different diseases is just accumulated. And if you intervene, as you would say, in that within the paradigm, if you intervene early in a life course, you have a larger chance of success. So again, speaking from a public health perspective, then it'd be really interesting to look more at that age group. There's a lot of people who participated in this study. It was funded by the Danish Outdoor Council, and that's all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Lærke. We will open up for questions and comments. Please go ahead. Andrew?
Well, you said there's no negative, but some of these programs can be terribly negative. You won't see it if you want to look at the effect of the population. You have to look at individuals. You know, the negative effects can go all the way through to death. There have been lots of deaths in those adolescent programs in the US, for example. And then, of course, if you just statistically look at the whole group, the negative ones get averaged out. You're just saying on average they're
My conclusion is basically just that from these studies, they did not report it, but I completely agree. They didn't. The studies that we were looking at here weren't reporting on fatalities. They weren't reporting on injuries. But then again, we didn't find these studies. But that could also be due to misrepresentation in the studies that are published. So your work should probably have been included here if we had a...
I didn't particularly mean fatalities. You can have, say that 8% improvement, but that consists of going backwards for some students, and there were just more students who improved, but some also went backwards.
Yeah, that was an aspect that wasn't very often sort of explored, whether some groups benefited more from participating, or whether some groups didn't benefit. That's a good point.
Just a small curiosity, why you did not choose gardening
It's a good question. We could have, but in the way that we conceptualized frilosloop in this systematic review, we considered part of frilosloop having this experiential element of being away. So we didn't want to include private gardens. That's the best answer I could give. And it's also we also conceptualized frilosloop in collaboration with the Danish Outdoor Council. So it's not actually a definition that we had complete ownership over. But yeah, the main reason would be that we wanted to we define frilosloop as also having an element of being away.
Given that all the research is low quality in terms of is that something you think that the outdoor academics we need to look at to try and get our research to be high quality? I know you mentioned these health, but for us to then demonstrate
would be
There's
amazing.
somewhere that we need to start. So from my yes, a different question. It's more about then how do we change what we do to make it effective?
Yeah, well, I think that some of the things that I spoke about was looking at ways of describing very accurately what is going on, what kind of pedagogies are being implemented or intended to be implemented and are being implemented. So I want to explore what's monitoring what is going on and what is intended to be going on, how much of it, who's involved, who's the facilitator, really trying to make deep descriptions of what intervention is, and then also being mindful of ways of controlling, of using well-controlled designs in a setting like this. There's a lot of adaptive designs, they call it, that could be useful in a setting like this where you can't, for example, always randomize. You can do dynamic waitlisted designs or interrupted time series designs, and using those, or be mindful of those type of things, increase it massively.
I think we have 2 questions more.
Yeah. So in British Columbia, we use the University of British Columbia uses the early diagnostic instrument to communicate with schools. And what that is the kindergarten teachers. There's 5 domains, one of them being health, one of them being social, one being academic, blah, 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 whatever they are. What it does is the learning person comes and they tell us the results and they tell the percentage of each domain that they are maybe not scoring or at risk is the words that they use. And what we found this year that was really interesting was that it wasn't the academic that was the problem. It was the health and social that they were at risk for more, and then so that the schools could then know, and we could actually find out exactly which students, of course you couldn't, but we would know the percentage of 33% are at risk for the social or for the, which if you relate it to the outdoor education and other correlations, that you wonder if those are things that need to help address those issues. And I would think that that's a pretty good diagnostic instrument that they use from UBC.
Was there some research that you investigated that was very good?
Heaps.
Yeah, so so it's something like we should use this method or use this framework or some like a recommendation of.
Yeah, I think it would really depend very much on the specific intervention that you're looking at, because there is a very large variety in the types of friluftsliv and the ways that it's being implemented, and I think it would have an impact on what exactly you would be doing. I don't think I can give you at the top of my head an example of a study that should be a go-to study. There are some. I can send them to you.
Talk about it later.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for coming.